Welcome to the Elite Trainer Academy, brought to you by Mind Pump. Today, I sit down with Justin Andrews and we talk about client programming, and more specifically, how you can get better at the areas of programming that a lot of trainers tend to neglect. So if you find this content valuable, please share with a friend. Justin, it's a long time coming.
Kyle!
This is a long time coming. Now that we're alone, we could talk about glutes and football.
I kind of figured that's where we're going to go today. Yeah.
Heavy metal.
Yeah. Heavy metal. Yeah. It's great to have another guy here that actually appreciates mosh pits and getting after it sometimes.
I don't know if I appreciate mosh pits, but I can respect it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were there with me, so I can validate.
I saw it. So I wanted to start out today as a continuation of the conversation that we were having yesterday with our in-house trainers. Mm-hmm. So you were doing some training with our staff on rotational exercises, and then a couple weeks before that was lateral exercises. So I wanted to start there with how, as a new trainer, how do you start to implement more rotational and lateral exercises with clients? Because it's probably one of the most neglected areas of training.
Oh yeah, it's super overlooked. I mean, this has been kind of I guess something I've noticed a lot with my own personal training experience and also looking at what other trainers are doing with their clients and where there was deficits. I always found that I had the best benefit by including a lot of rotation and lateral movements to counter a lot of just these fixed positions and postural positions we hold throughout the day, and just not being responsive and reactive to unforeseen variables that everyday people encounter. And so it leads to dysfunction, it leads to pain down the road, a whole host of things. So it's an important aspect of training that I think it's completely overlooked. And we all just want to focus on those main lifts that build muscle and give you the best result, which, that's great. And we want to provide that kind of results for our clients. But at the same time, we want to avoid a lot of the pitfalls. We want to set them up for long-term success. And I think that including these and really being intentional and programming them really helps with that. It helps you to avoid having to get setbacks and have to go on a corrective exercise path, which can be mundane and frustrating for your clients to go through. So so that would be the first thing I do is really look and assess my workouts and the programming for the month, for 3 months to a year. To make sure that the volume of rotation and lateral movements, there's at least some representation there, and that could be just as simple as adding it into an overhead press or a core exercise, or getting some hip rotation and adding that within a split stance or a lunge. And so these are opportunities I always find is. It's an easier way to start kind of including and sneaking those in.
Do you have some exercises that are kind of go-tos with introducing to regular Gen Pop clients? I think it's almost a different conversation if we're talking about athletes. And I think on some level, it's actually a little bit easier or more obvious with athletes, but with just general population clients that are just coming to you to build muscle or lose body fat, maybe not so obvious. So do you have some exercises that are almost your go-tos with starting to incorporate some of these moves?
Yeah. I usually start with, trunk rotations is your very basic way to include. So that I'll do that with the cables or rubber bands. And that's it helps me to teach a couple different things. So rotating is a very important function, but also anti-rotation is another equally as important concept that I want my clients to understand and to be able to hold positions and anchor themselves in these positions so they can produce the action they want while maintaining control and stability and balance. And so I usually start there because it's a familiar place for a lot of people. They understand the concept of having to rotate, but now just adding that one little extra tweak to it where I keep those hips locked and fixed in that position, and then having them rotate across with their torso, it really helps them too to be able to activate and feel that a bit more recruitment wise with their core. And then again, I mentioned earlier the overhead press. I think For me, I've always run into a wall with my shoulders whenever I was bench pressing or whenever I was overhead pressing. In terms of there was always this natural limitation. I would achieve a certain weight, and then I would start to feel that force really add up, and I would feel that joint pain start to come through. And once I started to incorporate more rotational movements, it was a huge help in terms of stabilizing that joint and allowing me now to, and this is where I guess I kind of geek out. I might lose some people sometimes because I talk a little bit about force and force production, and I talk about some of these concepts, but in recruitment, muscle recruitment, and that whole process, but for me, simply just adding that rotation, it allows these other supporting cast type muscles, in the rotation to be able to stabilize it. And so the more stable your joint is, the more your body allows you to produce force. So it allows you to you actually achieve more strength. And so that's a concept that we could talk about in a whole nother podcast about, how do you do that and why mobility is so important for that reason, is because you're allowing your body to achieve a higher level of performance because you now have the foundation is stronger, the foundation of support. The infrastructure is solid to allow you to stress test that even further and achieve higher results with your performance.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting concept. I don't think a lot of trainers have quite, I don't think it's clicked with a lot of trainers, why this is so important. Especially somebody that listens to the Mind Pump podcast all the time. You guys talk about it all the time, include lateral, rotational type exercises. I don't think sometimes they fully understand why. Okay, cool. If I'm working with an athlete, obviously I should, incorporate some rotation stuff because it mimics maybe some of the stuff that they do in their sport. Mm-hmm. But for if I have a client that just wants to, lose body fat, it's why is that so important? And I think when you can kind of unlock this idea, I think it changes a lot for you because, for example, you did a lot of shoulder rotation stuff in preparation for your 315 overhead press.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Because what it does is you can continue to just hammer away with the same movement that mimics the PR you're trying to set or the goal that you're trying to set. But it's you can only squeeze so much out of that. And there's these other areas or other quote unquote functions of a joint that just are being completely neglected, that if you were just to even just strengthen those by 10%, that would transfer so much more to your end goal than just trying to squeeze out an extra 1% of the motion that you're actually mimicking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually, it's funny to me because I know so many really strong people that are so susceptible to injury.
Yes.
For that reason, because they get really, really strong in a specific type of a movement, and they don't support that movement with what you're talking about, which is all these other functions of that joint that have to really they have to stabilize, they have to control, they have to withstand a lot of the other lateral and rotational forces that will pull you out of that vertical line that you're trying to achieve. So if I'm trying to press straight up, well, guess what? There's still lateral forces with that weight that may shift the weight a little bit. It may rotate your body a little bit based on, you having to get it up, especially, and for me, trying to achieve 315, it's a very bilateral movement. It's very much a pretty straightforward process, but if there's any type of a shift, if my body has any kind of, if my feet slip at all and I have some kind of unforeseen rotation that I have to account for, now because of the fact that I've increased the risk by adding all this excess amount of weight and force down to my body, I'm really in trouble. Yeah. I'm very vulnerable at that point. And so to be smart and diligent about training, I'm considering the fact that as I get stronger, I'm also building up the the structure with it, which is you have to express those other parts of the joint and strengthen them alongside it in order to really achieve an even greater result.
Yeah. And this is across like all spectrums of clients too. Like on the far end of the spectrum, like you're talking about someone who's really strong in one plane of movement, like let's say a power lifter, very, very strong in the sagittal plane with deadlifting, squatting, benching, but then maybe they bend over to the side to pick something up and then they hurt themselves. Right.
Yeah.
And then you have the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which is like you hear the story of like the old lady or the old man who's driving their car and they turn their head to look behind them to reverse their car and then they hurt their neck. So it's like, it's both ends of the spectrum. Like the principle here is like, we just need to be training.
Yeah. It's a lack of strength somewhere.
That's all it is. Lack of strength and lack of stability in different ranges of motion.
Yeah.
Now, a question I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on here is how do you draw the line between effective rotational movement and just some of the
silliness.
some of the weird BS you see people making up online. You especially see this in the athlete world, like trainers just putting really weird combinations of things together. Like, where do you draw that line? Like, how do you know if something's actually effective?
I think it comes with experience, I would say, is first and foremost. But and this is where I give a little bit of grace to trainers. Mainly if they're applying it to themselves first and they're going through that process of really deciding and determining whether or not that movement's valuable, and I could bring that into my list of tools to grab. Mm-hmm. And I spent a lot of years self-experimenting, and there's some things where it's like, oh, this is a wild movement, but it may apply for a surfer, or it may apply for like some kind of an extreme sport or some really unique like pole vaulting, or like that's why it's like it's hard to. Again, this is another thing that I get irritated with the social media and online side of things is when you see a video and you see a really silly movement, but on the other side of that, there's a lot of intention behind it because there's a whole story of what this is actually like leading up towards. But for me personally, I do go through a lot of filtering with movements, and I've done a lot of different certifications and courses to educate myself around the concepts that they're trying to promote with these. And so if you can understand that and you really want to seek this out and like how to really define that for you and you as a trainer and a professional, I think first of all, you attend the course, you understand the concepts and you can get the education behind it. Now you go apply it to yourself. And then you understand your client's needs, and then does this fit within any of your client's needs? Because there's clients, they vary, and if I do have a sports specific client, I may hold off on that tool. Maybe I could use it down the road for somebody specifically that I could categorize with that. Or like I've learned a lot of different mobility techniques and moves that, maybe somebody that has back pain or has some kind of traction issue, like maybe now I can apply this very specific move to help with that. So I think it's really broadening your database of movement. And then your filter has to be, I've gone through it myself. I can feel my way through the movement. I can really understand it personally first. And then now I can cue with more insight to my client and convey it without all the jargon and all of the anatomical terminology. So they can understand it and they can now, be able to really use that themselves and not just, within the workout. But to kind of point out some really silly moves, there's a lot of silly moves I've thrown away.
Yeah.
Like there's just things I've learned that I'm like, there's just no use for this. So, and this is from like very credible certifications and I just haven't found any usefulness out of certain things. So my list has shrunk a lot over the years.
Yeah. I mean, the stuff that works, right?
That's it.
So I think obviously a bit of a difficult question for you to answer, because there's just so much nuance behind it. So like it is, and I've learned this, especially like early on when I started training, like I used to fall into this trap of like just being very like instantly judgmental of like a trainer doing an exercise that I see that I'm like, oh, that's dumb.
Yeah.
But there is so much nuance behind it, to your point. Like what I've learned is that as long as they have an intention behind it and the intention is logical, go for it. You know what I mean?
There's
like,
something there.
Yeah. As long as you have a desire, like just doing an exercise because it looks cool or you saw someone do it on social media and it's like, I think this is a good exercise. Like, okay, I might make fun of you a little bit for that. But if it's like you actually have a real intention behind it and you're like, okay, I'm doing this because this is my desired outcome. I think for me, that's kind of how I view it, is like maybe it looks a little silly or something, but if you have a logical intention behind it, then like awesome.
Well, and two, I think if I were to look at your breadth of work, or like I guess the overall program in terms of the macro program, not just that one exercise and that one workout. And I see the majority of the workouts have your staple movements in there that are going to build a really strong foundational base. And then, we're going to address imbalance and dysfunction, and we're going to work, accessory exercises in there to also complement the big lifts. And all that is accounted for and really diligently thought out. Yeah. And then you see one like wild one in there. Yeah. I'll give you some grace with that. But if a lot of it is just for show and entertainment, this is where I have a problem. Yeah. Or it's a very dogmatic lens that they're viewing this through, and it's been something that's been taught to them by a guru, and then now this is Bible for them.
Yeah, and they don't even understand why.
But they don't know why. They don't know exactly. And then they're not really solving a problem with their client. They're teaching them like circus moves.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it's the same thing we see on like the nutrition side too. It's like there are cases where the keto diet or the carnivore diet are like really great if you have the right application. But just doing it because you heard it's like the best way to lose weight or whatever, and just applying it across the board, it's like, what's the point? Like there's no intent, there's no logical intent behind it. You're just doing it because you heard that it was the thing to do.
Yeah. I think too, I used to struggle with this because I used to feel like everything that I promote is so simplistic, and I'm like, am I missing something here? Because every intelligent trainer or coach that I used to follow they'd lose me with all these concepts, because it just would start simple and then they would just keep adding on to it and I just get lost in the weeds. And I felt a little bit alone in the sense that I was like taking concepts and just taking maybe like 2 to 3 of those concepts that actually applied with my clients. Yeah. And I'm like, this is all that I got from that week-long course. Yeah. Like, am I doing something wrong? Yeah. And I was insecure. Like it almost felt a bit imposter kind of syndrome from that. But then I just started to own that. And this is like a strength of mine that I didn't realize at the time. And it's because a lot of my intention and focus kept its sight on my client's success and my client's needs, not my own ego of teaching them and like pushing them and progressing them into these areas that they weren't even interested in, for one, which I've seen with a lot of trainers and their clients. And you see everybody doing wild stuff as opposed to, and they're all kind of doing the same thing. And I'm like, okay, so it's more of they're building them up to support their ideology or something.
Yeah. Well, it's really tempting as a trainer. Like you go do some certification, you learn some cool new thing. It's really tempting to want to like apply it to your clients right away and then like explain it and stuff. And it's like, cause it makes it seem like you're very knowledgeable and smart. It's a really like tempting trap to fall into as a trainer. I get it. I fell into that all the time in like the early days of training. I still catch myself doing that sometimes with clients where it's like I'm way over explaining something and I'm like, wait, back up. This does not matter to them.
A lot of times it's because you're excited. You just learned
so
something new.
So it's a good thing. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but it's definitely something as a trainer, like learn to control that a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to go into a point though. You said like a lot of the stuff that you do is simple. Mm-hmm. That's how it should be. And I think this is what's so beautiful about the MAPS programs is the way you guys have set it up is like, it's so simple. Like it's just simple stuff. Like I could pick 3, maybe 4 MAPS programs that would cover like 95% of my clientele and 95% of their workouts. Like can just be from 3 to 4 programs. Like it's just the basic stuff. And then that last like 5% is where we can mix in like some, maybe a little bit of novelty. So like things stay exciting for them, or maybe like, they want to try something different, something new, like great, we can use that last 5% for that. But majority of clients, it's like, it's all simple stuff. We were just talking about this earlier with a certain person who has posted these really cool, unique exercises with bands and rotation and all this stuff. And it's really, really cool, but that's 100% of his programming. And so it's like on a macro scale, for most people, there's certainly applications where like maybe you would want to do something like that, especially if they really enjoy it. Right. But for most people, it's like, I'm not going to put them on 100% of their program being this weird, unique rotational stuff. But what I can do is take 1 or 2 of those things and teach it to a client, every so often, and it's going to be super beneficial.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's a tough thing it takes a lot of discipline to actually like do that though with a client where you're not getting overly excited about something and just throwing him into the deep end with all this new stuff, but like choosing to be very intentional and effective with like what you implement.
Yeah. I think, again, this falls alongside wisdom as you get through the experience.
That's what it is.
Because initially you feel like you don't know enough. And so you seek out a lot of education, you seek out a lot of knowledge, from other trainers and what they're doing and all these concepts. And so you end up adopting all the concepts. Yeah. And then you want to razzle dazzle your clients. You want to make it entertaining. You want to excite them. And so you teach them new concepts, and then you teach them too many new concepts. And then you start to realize it's at the expense of their results. It's at the expense of them psychologically, because now they're overwhelmed. Now they're confused. They're not in line with you in terms of where you're going with their programming and what they're actually achieving at this point, because it gets away from you. And it's interesting because back then, this term muscle confusion, this was a little bit more on the beach body side of things. Like they had kind of these interesting terms that they threw out, but it was let's just call it the entertainment fitness industry. That's where that came about. And your everyday average person saw it a lot because it was on TV. It was infomercials. It was all over, nationwide. And so I think the thought process was we have to really up our novelty, and we have to get people to do not just strength training, but now we have to do plyometrics in there. Now we have to throw yoga in there at the same time, and then all of these like crazy ab exercises. And, it's just throw the kitchen sink in the workout. Yeah. Just put it all in there. But now how do you parse that out? How do you test that? How do you measure results from that? Maybe the frustrating part too is, and then CrossFit I would lump into the same category of just like inundating people with all the concepts at once, in the most ineffective way possible. Yeah. Because what's frustrating to me is that there's a lot of gold in these movements that they're presenting, but they're not doing this with the right intention, and they're not really building them up for these skills, and overlooking the fact that your simple barbell squat is such a skillful exercise in itself. We could stay there for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's at your fault as a coach for not making that a priority and not making that something that your client gets excited about and showing them progress in it. because it's one of the most valuable exercises you can do. I don't need to do jumping, burpee, squat, lunges. I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. So you kind of go through this process where you see that, you see like, oh my God, like I can't do that. I have to kind of pull back and this is part of my career where it's like, I kind of got caught in the muscle confusion, side of things because I did feel like my clients would see it on TV. They want to get excited. They want to try. They want to get worked out. They want to sweat. They want to feel sore.
Yeah.
I mean, these are a lot of things we talk about on the podcast all the time to not use those as indicators of a successful workout or not. And we still need to just keep saying it because there's just been so many years of people understanding workouts as that's what the goal is, right? Like we need to get sweaty, sore, and can't walk. We need to do that.
Right.
So yeah, I think, kind of working through all of that and then realizing like as the real value is being able to present concepts and build up skills without overwhelming and inundating them.
Yeah. I think every trainer goes through those mistakes at one point in their career. At what point, how far into your career do you feel like you started to get a handle and like, okay, I feel like I'm pretty good with exercise programming?
Pretty good. Like
when did you start to feel confident?
I felt confident pretty early on and just because of my athletic career and just my attention to detail with so I went through a few certification courses and I almost followed them to the T. And so I was just really leaning on that as my my base for how I trained everybody.
Yeah.
And so I was like naively confident, let's just say with that part of it. But I think it was like somewhere in the middle of my career where I just realized how much I didn't know.
Yeah.
And then that's where I just had this like shocking, like sort of revelation where I was like, I haven't been getting the type of long-term success. It's been minuscule. Like I could say it's probably like, 5% of my clients who really had long-term success versus short-term. The short-term success thing was addictive, and I could show people weight loss. I could show people, muscle gain, and I could really like provide intense workouts. But that's up to a point, and then the plateaus started to happen, and then I didn't really know how to troubleshoot through them, and so midway in my career, finally. I think after going through that realization and then getting back to, reading books like Super Training and really kind of coming back to these tried and true concepts of how to train people, using scientific concepts and, progressive overload and really taking, the best exercises as more of the priority. Then I started to shift, and then I started to see it in my clients more, and I started to get to the point where they got stronger, and then they became lifer clients. Yeah. And then I had maybe like 15 to 20 lifer clients towards the end of my career where I was just like, they were on autopilot. They just want to hang out.
Yeah.
And that's a great place to be as a trainer.
Yeah. So you mentioned one there, Super Training. Where, like, what are good resources for trainers that are trying to understand this stuff? Like, I think your national certifications, I mean, they give you the basic stuff you need, but there's so much stuff in there that you don't need. Like,
I think we talked about this before.
Oh yeah, for sure. We've talked about it a bunch.
Yeah.
I've never had a client ask me what the RDA of vitamin A is. Like it's like, why do we need to go through this stuff? Like, what are some actual like good resources for trainers to go who are like hungry to go learn this kind of stuff? Where do you go?
Well, for me, I was way big on mentorships.
Oh yeah,
sure. From the jump, because I'm a kinesthetic learner. I'm a visual learner. I'm not much of a, let's just say, a book student and a lecture student. Like I have a really hard time sitting there, and getting an audible education. And even with PowerPoint presentations and whatever else you're throwing out there, if I'm sitting and I'm having to absorb this information, it's really not going to do me a whole lot of good. I need to have that hands-on experience. I need to really troubleshoot in real time. I need to see how this applies. The application for me was everything. And I know that this industry, this career specifically, I think it's tailored more towards that. I think it really needs that, that sort of hands-on experience. And so more than anything, it needs to be in an environment where you're going to be presented a lot of different variables, a lot of different types of clients, a lot of people that first of all, you need a base of education. So I had that, went to college and graduated and was sports management major, but did a lot of, classes regarding anatomy and physiology and a lot of things related to the body and health. So I had a pretty good basis with that, and also my own personal training, leading into performance in sports. But it's almost like I had to throw that out when I was dealing with Gen Pop and general public type of a client where they were having a hard time getting up off the ground. Yeah. They were having a hard time balancing just in a split stance position. Like that was an alien to me. Like that was a big learning curve that I had to work my way through that on how to address each part of that process it just came naturally to me in movement. I could watch you move and I could mimic it to the best of my ability and I could get close. And then I do it again. And that's how I would kind of iterate based off of what I'm seeing and applying personally. And so now I had to work through that with clients. Let's work through that process together. I want to see how you're moving. I want to now coach and cue and guide you and shape that process so it's more effective, it's more efficient, and you own that. You own that movement now. You understand it because you can carry it from there on. So I can't overstate the fact that I just think that's probably the most valuable for trainers is to shadow a really, really good trainer and understand their process and their communication, their delivery, what they're observing with their client, how they're able to notice and predict things before they happen. You don't have that predictability aspect you're going to get from a certification. Yeah. They don't teach that. You don't know any of that.
It's impossible.
No, concepts are great. Yeah. And I'm not downplaying education from, an academic perspective, but for your everyday average person, I can't point out an instance where I'm in my brain referring to a textbook page and I'm conveying that to my client. Yeah. I honestly have never done that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just got off recently an interview of a trainer that Katrina and I were interviewing for possibly coming onto the team here. And young kid, you could tell very intelligent, finishing up school right now, I believe exercise science degree. So obviously very intelligent, but some of the questions that I'm asking him, you can see it's very black and white when I ask some of these questions about coaching. Hearing an answer from somebody who has only the academic background, comparing that to a trainer who has no academic background, but instead took those 4 years or whatever and started just learning, founded themselves a mentor, got the reps in. The way that they answer those questions is very, very different. And you can hear it in the way that they speak, the confidence, obviously the actual advice that they're giving as well. This particular individual I'm thinking of is, it was very much my exercise physiology class, they said this. And so this is what I would do with the client. And it's okay, I know that you haven't actually experienced it because that's just not how it plays out.
It's all hypotheticals.
It's all it is. And there's so much nuance and there's so many different scenarios. And so that's what makes a really good coach is being able to kind of foresee some of those nuances and like, okay, maybe this isn't exactly like the scenario in the textbook. And so there may be things that are different about this person and things that I need to change about it. So, yeah, I mean, I second that advice of like, go find yourself a good mentor and shadow the good trainers, but even shadow the bad ones too. Like shadow everybody, because
I did that.
Yeah. I mean, and unfortunately there's probably trainers listening to this that they don't really have a choice. Like they only are around like maybe not so good trainers.
Yeah.
And I can empathize with that. I've worked in a couple different big box gyms over my career. And I mean, some of them I had some good trainers to shadow and then some I just didn't. I'm obviously, fortunate now that I get to shadow and learn from the best of the best. But I mean, I can sympathize with somebody who's listening to this, like, man, it would be cool to get a good mentor, but like, where do I go to do that?
Yeah. Where do you go? I know it is difficult. And, and you'll learn different things even from bad trainers and seeing too how that affects their clients and affects their re-sign ability and their business side of it.
And it's a bit simplistic to say like bad trainer, but like I think you get the point where it's like, you want to learn what to do and also
what not to do. Yeah. It's just, you can observe and pick up on things where I'm not going to bring that into my business at all. Like I'm just not going to repeat those items that I noticed. Yeah. So, but back to the MAPS programs and the simplicity of it. I think our entire philosophy with that was based upon our experience, getting to the place where simplicity wins. Like we had to go through that entire process of learning almost all the concepts that are out there, all the philosophies that are out there. And then we consulted with each other from their experience with, so we each had at least 10 to 12 years of experience on our own individually, with different specialties as well, which I think did play into, it played into our favor with the creation of the different types of avatars we were trying to address. And there was lots of commonalities with those avatars. And so like, even you notice like there's probably like 3 to 4 programs we could really address almost any client that you're going to come across. But it's those little bit of differences too, that then we can get a little more granular. But we really wanted to leave it open so other trainers and other coaches could now kind of use that as scaffolding, use that as their baseline to modify, tweak, and individualize with their client. Because again, this is something, and I think I've used this sort of analogy on the podcast many times, that I always felt like a bit of a detective.
Yeah.
Like the whole process in the beginning when you're assessing, I'm really like observing and trying to make mental notes and also like physical notes of what I see and where I can improve in. And that's, it spans beyond the gym too. It's also in the lifestyle, it's in the stress levels, it's in their relationships, and so there's just so much more to coaching that all of that affects what you're going to see in the workout and in the training that's leading them towards their desired outcome. So all of it is relevant, and if we can present it in the most simplistic fashion, you're going to get the best adherence. You're going to get the best long-term client that will trust you and will go with you through that process.
But that's what was so interesting to me when I first got to sit in on some of the creation of the MAPS programs. Like when I started getting involved with that process with you guys, it was so interesting to me because I'd be sitting there, and there'd be like a debate on a certain exercise. And, I would say I kind of fall into the camp of like, I'm really interested in like biomechanics and like, like more of the probably scientification, if that's, I don't know if that's a word, but
sure. Well,
overthinking and overanalyzing, all the biomechanics side of things when it comes to exercising. And so, you know, I remember sitting in and thinking like, okay, there's this debate about this exercise. Like, you know, if we really want to be like the most effective with this particular exercise we're going to plug in, we should actually do it this way or this way. And I remember like the conversation around that was so interesting to me because that's not really what the conversation was. It wasn't like, how can this exercise in this workout, like how can we decide the most optimal exercise here? Instead, it was more like, what's an exercise that makes sense here logically? It obviously makes making sure it's not like counter to the objective here. But like then it's, is this actually realistic? Like, is the average person that's following this program, are they actually going to do that exercise?
Yeah.
Like, are they going to?
There's so much there to unpack. I mean, because too, like in our experience, you understand the immediate reaction from your client too.
Yeah.
Are they even going to like doing this movement? I mean, that plays a factor.
Yes.
Is this taxing? Where do we put this in the order of priority? Is the volume accounted for in terms of the muscle groups? Like, are we checking the boxes there? You know, what is the actual adaptation? Are we too far off of the actual adaptation we're trying to achieve, or is this in line with that? Do we want to challenge them here? Do we want to promote a new skill for them to learn? How can we shape this exercise so maybe it's not too complex in its delivery? Yeah. You know, and so, yeah, I do sort of relate with you in that I want to always provide that best biomechanic option. I want to over deliver in what I've read and what I've seen, and you know, I come from more of a strength coach camp that is very performance driven, and so the performance side of things, I see how that translates towards enhancing skill and enhancing attributes through movement. But maybe that client's more just interested in aesthetics. Maybe they're just interested in feeling good and not being in pain. And so it all seems very simplistic until you put a lot of thought and intention into it. And now is where you really have to like understand who that person is in front of you. Yeah. And that's everything. Otherwise, if you veer too far away from that, now that's a disservice to that person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what was so eye-opening, was that like, it's not about creating like the most effective or optimal program. It's like what actually makes the program so optimal, quote unquote, optimal and effective, is that people want to stick to them. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I first started running the MAPS programs, when I was first introduced to Mind Pump, like it was like, I was like, oh, I'm looking forward to my workout. You know, like I had never followed a program that I was like actually like excited to go through like the progression over the course of like the 3 phases or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. I liked working out on my own, but like up until that point, I'd never found a program that I liked doing, you know? And so I think that's what's so effective about it. And I've seen that with all my clients too. It's like when I start to veer off too much into like, we have this very specific goal that we have, so I'm going to start programming very specifically. Like if I get too far away from the basics, then it's just, not only do I not get them to their goal as effectively as I would have thought, they just also don't enjoy the workouts as much.
Yeah. And I think this is why it's always hard for me too. And we get some criticism, especially amongst other trainers and in the forum, like, and I'll read things like why we didn't do things a certain way, or like why we didn't put like rows in front of pressing. And yeah, like you could make an argument biomechanically that's probably good for, you know, setting them up for a good position with, you know, with their shoulders. And, you know, at the same time, you have to look at what also like through experience, we know people they actually prefer this order. Yeah. And even personally, I prefer that order. And the difference being so minimal that we're going to lean more on the preferences people have with that and their enjoyment in the experience of it sometimes. versus like, well, this is like the optimal, most
it doesn't matter.
appropriate way to do this. So I think that's where it's interesting to try to educate and convey that to other coaches, because you get too heady a lot of times with what you've learned in a lot of these courses, and you're trying your best always to follow some kind of formula that's like the most efficient, optimal way to do things.
Yeah, I'm all for, being effective, but I mean, at the end of the day, most of that stuff doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Like, what matters is getting your clients to show up and helping them be consistent and develop a good relationship with fitness. That's like 99% of your clients. That's all that matters. Like, you have that 1%, and the 1% is typically where you'll hear like the criticism of the programs, where it's like, maybe for like the competitive bodybuilder or powerlifter, okay, maybe you're right, maybe it doesn't make sense, but it's like, that's 1%. Like 99% of the people that the trainers, like that the trainers listening to this, the clients they're working with, like it doesn't matter.
And we'll refer them to better programs, right? Like that's what's always funny to me. Like Westside Barbell, like they got great programs, there's a lot there when you get that granular and specific with your focus. Like if it's very performance, or you're trying to get up on stage and compete, and which ironically though, the simplicity in our programs has produced champions. And it's interesting to me because I think that people get so myopically focused with this goal, and then like everything has to be so regimented and confined that they actually like deter a lot of their progress because it again, they might be adding too much stress. This may impede on their sleep. This may impede on their other like behaviors throughout the day and their the rest of their activities. And they may just be psychologically not as capable or they're not going to perform as well because psychologically they might have impeded on that. So
yeah. I mean, I'm typically taking out the 5 sets of shrugs and anabolic, though. I will say.
You can blame Sal for that. I always defend him on that because I mean, it is like shrugs. I understand that, especially from a female perspective, they're always confused. Like, but it does help build up that shoulder. It's good for them.